All informed Canadians by now know there was a disaster in the small mining town of Elliot Lake, Ontario. A roof collapsed at a mall. Many were trapped. We still don't really know how many. We know of one death, but there are still reports of several missing. And we don't know if any of the missing are trapped in the rubble. And we don't really know, why the search for the trapped was called off after only 2 days. Except we do know that some lower-level government officials in the Labour Ministry had something to do with it. And they acknowledge that although they say they were not really issuing orders, whatever they were issuing, they say, was misinterpreted. And by the way, at this point, if you tuned in just a few seconds late, you must think we're talking Haiti or Burma or a handful of other places in what we used to call the third world, where third-rate people govern and the population is treated as third class. And whatever you do hear from those in governance isn't worth 3 cents on the free market of credible information. But folks, this is not Haiti or Burma. This is Canada. And so it's time for some Canadian common sense. Okay, Elliot Lake may not be Toronto, Vancouver, Montreal, but the people in that northern Canadian town have every right to be treated first class by first-rate search and rescue officials that, by the way, Canada has in abundance in both our civilian and military services. So when the rescue efforts were called off after only 2 days, even though the sounds of tapping had been picked up, and it wasn't coming from a DVD of a Fred Astaire movie, the population of Elliot Lake, Canada, and the rest of Canada became engaged and outraged. Somebody, 2 days after the fact, in the Premier's office, let the Premier know that as the CEO of the Government of Ontario, he had the authority to reinstate the search, and so he did. Dalton McGuinty didn't go to Elliot Lake before that search was called off, and he hasn't since he ordered the resumption. Politicians don't like to go to places where they know the reception will be less than jubilant. There's no jubilation tonight in Elliot Lake, and there shouldn't be. McGuinty said this week, after acknowledging that there had been confusion throughout the process, he said, and I quote, "There will be a time for questions to be asked about what, when, and how, and why not." Well, the time is tonight, Premier. When were you told that Elliot Lake was a disaster area and needed your immediate attention, like all provincial disaster areas? Were you told hours after it happened, when the mayor of Elliot Lake declared it? That's when all of us started paying attention. That's when we knew. Were you paying attention? How do you get your information? Pony Express? And why do you only get engaged after the entire country becomes alarmed? Because we know that we're not a nation of quitters. You've embarrassed us in front of the entire world. And we don't leave our wounded on the battlefield. You've embarrassed us in front of the entire world, Mr. McGuinty. But beyond the embarrassment, Premier, much more important than that, are that people are still looking for members of their families. If it were members of your family trapped in there, wouldn't it have taken 2 days to get the sleep out of your eyes? It wouldn't have taken 2 minutes. We hear all sorts of lame excuses for why the search was called off. But what's the excuse you have for the need to search for the CEO of Ontario days after a disaster has happened? The truth is, when you're a leader, you treat those citizens like they're members of your family, even if they had the unmitigated gall of not voting for your team during the last election. Did politics trump the need to rescue human life, Premier? Do people have to pay with their lives for not having voted Liberal in the last election? As of tonight, we need to change the moniker of the man who fails to govern Canada's largest province. As of tonight, the man who abandoned the family is no longer Premier Dad. As of tonight, he's Premier Deadbeat Dad. It's one thing to have to search for people in rubble, but we shouldn't have to need to search for Daddy when the kids are missing. Tonight, Dalton McGuinty is searching for his soul. It will be said someday by historians that he lost it in June of 2012 at the bottom of Elliot Lake. That's Canadian common sense. Elliot Lake, mistake. A disaster made worse by bungled rescue efforts. A wake-up call for all of Canada. For more, we go to Toronto Sun columnist Joe Warmington. Joe, you've been all in on this for several days now. I want to talk, first of all, about leadership. Where the hell is it?
Well, it's a good question. For all the money invested in leadership, it's down there in the bottom of the mine. It's not a mine, but it might as well be a mine because it's in a mining town. And this is a national disgrace. And as you said so well right there, it's a wake-up call for the whole country.
Okay, Joe, in general, when a mayor declares an emergency, I mean, all municipalities, large and small, they're all creatures of provinces. I mean, that's how our country is run. That's just constitutional stuff. So when the province becomes engaged, doesn't the CEO have to be more than just peripherally involved? I mean, this is a disaster in his province. Why would anyone not expect the premier to be instantly contacted?
Well, it's a good question. He was only 90 miles down the road in northern Ontario in Sudbury as well. And basically, the only thing that he's done right here is to turn around and tell the workers that had quit to go back. But all of this falls on the premier. This is his show and his province. Everything from before, Charles, when the people at the ministry that looks after safety says that the mall is safe, to whoever decided that it wasn't safe for so-called brave rescue workers to go in. And so the buck stops with him. And ultimately, I suspect that this, for Premier Dalton McGuinty, Charles, will be what Ipperwash and what Walkerton was for Mike Harris. It should be, and also Caledonia, which should have been something that stuck to McGuinty. So don't be surprised if he gets out of it, but he shouldn't.
Well, he only gets out of it if his opposition is totally incompetent. That's the only way he gets out of it. Look, he's portrayed himself as the father figure of Ontario, and we've had the moniker Premier Dad. And tonight I'm calling him Premier Deadbeat Dad because he abandoned the family. All these people are members of his family. That's what it is when you're CEO of Ontario. Now, here's the deal. He reacted to the calling off of the rescue. I can't believe that the premier in the first couple of days wouldn't have been engaged enough to be given information before any kind of decision was made on calling it off.
And he's covering his own butt by calling them back as well. I mean, this didn't happen in a vacuum. Somebody decided that this was over and that it was too dangerous. These $100,000 heroes need to sign a waiver and guarantee that they don't have anything happen to them. Or they won't go in. This is a very, very major development in Canada and needs to be looked at across the country, that you need to know as a taxpayer that there are only certain things that they'll do to protect you. And listen, nobody's buying it. We've covered things all over the world, Haiti, and obviously in Japan, where you see all kinds of heroics. 9/11 I was at, where I saw people with bare hands that don't even want a medal and don't want anything. They just were prepared to lay their lives down. Now, some of the people on the team, Charles, were prepared to do that, but obviously their masters wouldn't let them. And that scene of OPP officers and police standing in a line and not letting the people from the town, a mining town, go in and try to save their people. Listen, if you want to get in the way and not do your job, don't get in the way of the people that are prepared to be brave. And so, yeah, this all falls on the premier. I think that he should resign. I think that the ministers around him should resign. The government should fall over this. There's carnage in Elliot Lake, and it's not just the people of Elliot Lake that feel it, it's the whole country.
No, this is the whole country. This is the whole country's disaster. It's a black eye for the country because it goes to Canadian character. We are not quitters, as I said earlier. We don't leave our wounded, Joe, on the battlefield.
No, and that happened here. And we'll never know for sure. I have no trust in Ontario because of what happened with Dr. Charles Smith, the coroner that fudged the reports, and then he put a lot of people in prison for such things as killing their own kids, and they didn't do it. And so, I'd like to see an outside judge do an inquiry here, and I'd like to see all of the autopsies that are necessary here in Elliot Lake to be done in a way by someone outside, because I don't trust them. We need to know who was alive and when. And the fact that they're in there, and things are happening now is a disgrace. This stuff could have been happening on Sunday. We're better than this. This is Ontario, for crying out loud, and this is Canada. And, I don't care what anybody says. I guess I'm the bad guy and you're the bad guy, but we're going to call it for what it is. They're paid a lot of money. There's a lot of Governor General type awards for them. then if they're not going to do the job, we're going to point that out.
This is a softball question, so forgive me for this, but if this shopping mall had been in Willowdale or in Scarborough or in Mississauga, would this premier deadbeat dad, would he have been 2 days late and $2 billion short?
Well, I think that we all know the answer to that, and we understand that. I think that, what's coming out of this, it's a good question, not a softball question, is that people aren't going to trust or wait for their highly paid and very sensitive, don't want to get a scratch on them kind of rescuers. And, as you said, this country was built on people that stormed beaches and did all kinds of crazy things. Even up until this year, we still have people serving in very dangerous places. So you're right. If it was in Toronto or any major center, it would not be stood for. But it might as well be, because this is a retirement community, Charles, where a lot of people from around the country have gone to live. And so this is going to affect the whole country. And you know what? The fact that they were able to get the equipment up there 3 or 4 days later means that they could have got it up there hours later.
You bet. Joe, thank you very much for everything you do.
Thank you, Charles.